Funding for The Audit, Black Women in Leadership, post-George Floyd, is brought to you in part by Grand Victoria Foundation and generous Chicagoans like you.
Grand Victoria Foundation believes in a future where racial justice isn't just an idea, it's reality, where Black communities across Illinois have the power, resources, and opportunities needed to thrive. We support the wisdom, leadership, and work of those most impacted by the systems we look to change, trusting their ability to build power and change narratives. When all communities have the resources and support they need, all Illinoisans can thrive, ensuring equity in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is collective liberation. This is the work of Grand Victoria Foundation.
I'm Tracy D. Hall, and this is The Audit. Chapter 1, Tragedy Creates Opportunity. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police, a murder documented by the cell phones of shocked bystanders and replayed incessantly by the national and international media, companies and organizations desperate to demonstrate their commitment to racial justice and racial healing to a global public demanding accountability seem to jump at the opportunity to place Black women leaders into executive level positions, often for the first time, and as some would argue, without an actual plan or real commitment to support their success in these roles. The results, unsurprisingly, reflected this lack of forethought and ultimately placed the responsibility for success or failure on the shoulders of the new Black female leaders called in to fix old systemic problems.
Chinese health authorities are still working to identify the virus behind a pneumonia outbreak in the central city of Wuhan.
At least 59 people are believed to have been sickened by the new virus.
Afternoon news conference, President Trump provided an update on the coronavirus after the first reported U.S. death of a person in the Seattle area.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
I think if we go back to 2020, I think we can remember kind of the time period, right? Pandemic had hit. Country itself, I think, was scared about the future, not knowing what was going to happen. People were locked in their homes.
So when I go back to 2020, I think about how each of us were really frightened during that time. Everyone globally was very frightened. And we knew that there was no cure. If you could afford to not leave your house, you weren't going to leave your house. And so I actually think it's only because of that. It's only because we slowed down enough to pay attention that we all watched this video of George Floyd.
Police here now firing tear gas into the crowd. They are trying to push these folks back.
It should have been solved 50, 60 years ago.
For a brief moment in 2020, much of corporate America united around a common goal: to address the stark racial imbalances in their workplaces. George Floyd's death triggered widespread protests, which resulted in a rush of corporate pledges, primarily to hire, promote, and engage more Black individuals.
Honestly, there's so many names before George Floyd. There's so many incidences of this happening, but it's because we were so aware of our own mortality. And when we watched that it was a clear violation of this man who said he couldn't breathe and another man sitting on his neck, we watched a modern day lynching happen, that it created a emotive reaction. And I believe that emotive reaction was genuine, that people really were aghast and wanted to leverage what they understood about equity being different, that it wasn't gestural. It wasn't, hey, let's include one person that's different. Or, hey, let's try to have trainings about how to not say the thing that might hurt somebody's feelings. But it went to like, what does ownership mean? What does agency mean?
We had seen, the slaying of Trayvon Martin. We had seen the experiences with Breonna Taylor. This was not the first time, people tried to get things to listen. I mean, if you think about Black Lives Matter, that started in 2014. That was ground zero for Black Lives Matter. It wasn't 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. So it had been 6 years that the Black community and other allies were trying to rally to get people to wake up. And I think the biggest deficit was corporate America, because no matter how many conversations you were having, the representation in organizations did not change.
I think we can't understand 2020 and George Floyd without realizing that the proliferation of media and our ability to both receive information is ubiquitous, but also to ignore information, right, is at an all-time high. So you can just not deal with things that aren't pleasant. So this perfect storm of the pandemic and being sheltered in place really, to me, is the key of the story, because people who have historically experienced police brutality, the government not having your back, sleight of hand constantly with access to things and then it being removed, were not surprised. They were shocked at the level of brazenness of the officer to be staring down the young lady that was videotaping this incident, right? That he, even knowing that he was being recorded, and the proliferation of the access and exposure of what she could do with that data did not deter him. The perfect storm of all those things and the cacophony of the inability to get away from it made you the victim, and the you was everybody. So for the first time, at least in my memory, demographics, socioeconomics, we were all you, and he was staring at you. And for the first time, you could not deny the hate.
Don't do me like that, man. Leave me. Okay, I told you to leave. I was I am claustrophobic. I'm not working with me. Please. Pull him in. No. You take a seat. Pull him in. I can't joke. I can't breathe. Please. Fine.
How I saw the moment in 2020 after Mr. Floyd's murder is it was actually almost an explicit acknowledgement of anti-Blackness. It almost felt, right? It's like we are making these commitments because of what we saw happen to a Black person. So it wasn't about DEI actually, and it wasn't even about racial equity or justice. It was to me, it felt very homed in on Blackness, anti-Blackness.
And so for us, I remember at night, kind of my homework at night was, getting together with all of my colleagues that were African American across many organizations, many institutions, and we're all kind of brainstorming and recapping what happened in our organization for the day. And for the first time, we felt like we had the con on calling the shots during a crisis, right? I think corporate leaders recognized that they didn't have the language or the experience or even the diversity amongst their leadership team to call the shots. And for the first time, they started to lean on more junior people that had lived experiences to really help lead the moment. And that's where you saw a lot of task force happening. That's when you saw a lot of, assembly of, CEOs making public commitments around their representation numbers and signing pledges together and saying, we're going to increase women in the workplace by 50% or whatever those goals were.
We saw a major influx of organizations that we have been working with who were coming back to us and new organizations. And in some cases, they had to wait at least 6 months for us to have the opportunity and really the time to work with them because we were literally bursting at the seams with inquiries.
Post George Floyd, everything accelerated. And I know just even for myself, I started to get job inquiries from across the country. And I felt like everyone was looking for a Black woman who understood racial equity. And I noticed that with a lot of my friends as well, that there were these opportunities that they were extremely qualified for, but would never have been considered for.
And I finally felt like it was genuine. I did. I'm not gonna lie. I felt like it was genuine. Not because they had done anything different before, but the voices at the table were different, right? And I did see this shift of power where leaders were listening and people who were oftentimes overlooked or marginalized, but only good enough to be, number two in certain departments, et cetera, were leading these efforts, right?
Some of it, I believe, was genuine, like this emotive realization that things had to change and this willingness to change them. And some of it was performative and optics, that people felt like, oh, this time, we can't not hire a Black person or a brown person to run this. And so that led to a lot of the George Floyd hires.
We saw people who were really interested in the work, who had been doing the work, commit to the work. We saw extraordinary statements being written. We saw billions of dollars that were pledged to working on equity issues. And we saw that for at least a year and a half.
We are creating a Center for Racial Equity, and we committed $100 million over 5 years. We have a lot of diverse officers, but we're not as diverse as we want to be.
Target just announced a multi-billion-dollar investment to support Black-owned businesses that'll make a difference. Target plans to invest $2 billion to get products from more than 500 Black-owned businesses in stores.
What if we gave back even more to the planet than we take? What if we fight for racial justice with equity and inclusion as if it was as essential as the air we breathe?
As diverse as our products and customers, so is our company. At Ford, we not only celebrate diversity, we embrace it because it makes us a better, a stronger, and a more robust company.
Hello and welcome to Community Chats. Inclusion and diversity are important for me as a business leader because they just make business sense. So making sure that you have a workforce that reflects your customer base really drives positive outcomes for business.
And we feel like it's critical for corporate leaders to step in right now and to speak up. And I'm so proud to see so many companies stepping forward, so many CEOs stepping forward and making commitments.
I think this false belief that persists, that it's hard to find those investment opportunities out there. How did you find these organizations? How did you decide who you guys were going to partner with?
You really hit it on the head. This myth that we have a pipeline problem, that there are not incredible Black female entrepreneurs and companies and organizations that are targeting these issues, it's just plain wrong.
This is another moment where it is like, is the progress is there too much progress? Because even though we wanted to feel a little bit better by being a little bit more inclusive, our conditions still are the same.
Equity demands sharing. And America is built up on this idea of a bootstrap mentality, right? That there's this individual, amazing achievement, a meritocracy that we have, and that throughout history, people have gotten everything on merit. But the reality is, America is built on colonization. America is built on rape and pillage. America is built on slavery. And there is so much economic loss. Racial covenants in Chicago, which Lorraine Hansberry shined a light on, cost us $4 billion of wealth in the Black community. Just completely extracted. Never happened. Taken away from us.
But if you think about a household, the most sacred decision you're ever going to make is, what do you do with your kids? People move all over the country to decide what schools they're going to put their kids to. People decide a lot of things around the future of their children. Back in slavery days, who watched your kids? Black women, right? So you trusted us with your most prized possession and your children when we had no value, when we could be sold, right? The most important thing in your life, we were the blueprint enough to raise, to instill values in, to teach them how to read, to color with them, to make sure they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You trusted us to do that as Black women. And you fast forward that to your point to many women's, rights movements, and we make a little progress and a little progress and a little progress. But you also think about the resiliency of a Black woman. We have to be, forgiving, because we understand that when things go bad, it gets worse for us, because from a caste system perspective, we've always been at the bottom, right? We've always been at the bottom of the totem pole.
Fast forward to the 60s and 70s, Black women are actually the backbone of the civil rights movement. So we often talk about, Martin Luther King. On the occasion of this Martin Luther King birthday, I took the opportunity to talk about Lorraine Hansberry. Her play, Raisin in the Sun, was a watershed moment because it shined a light on economic segregation in the North while we still battled against Jim Crow in the South. Lorraine Hansberry would inspire Martin Luther King. Before his first I Have a Dream speech, his first iteration of that speech was written on the heels of the premiere of Raisin in the Sun. So he adored Lorraine Hansberry. It would be Ella Jo Baker, who mobilized young people to do sit-ins at lunch counters in the civil rights movement. Her and Dr. King were always at odds because the men were always out front to lead, but it was the women who organized the March on Washington. It would be the women who mobilized people at the lunch counters. Ella Jo Baker, in fact, trained YWCA women. At one point, we had chapters on college campuses. There was a math club, there was a YWCA club, and Ella Jo Baker would train those women, and they would travel down to the South to be a part of the movement. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a watershed moment, not just for Black people and people of color, but for women. Women rolled the coattails of that civil rights movement and that act, and it protected not just Black people, but people of color, people with different abilities, protection against gender discrimination. It protected so many people. So King and all of the civil rights advocates assembled a rainbow coalition, a coalition that advocated for the rights of everyone. But sometimes it feels that there's not full support for that, right? The support weakens. So you're right. That has happened throughout history. And as a Black woman, I've received inconsistent report. There's various reports. Harvard University School of Business, the Kennedy School of Business did a study around Black women in the workplace and what are the obstacles, what are the challenges that they've been facing. One of the obstacles was actually white women not supporting them in roles inside organizations. That's hard to hear, it's hard to say, but it's true.
Right now, I would say white women are voting in their enlightened self-interest, right? So that is why you see like different or greater percentages of them or significant critical masses of them voting on the right versus like what that looked like in support for a candidate like Kamala Harris, where you would think these are the moments where there would be the greatest solidarity because of the broadness of the threats to women overall. But the part of the enlightened self-interest is the interest in the whiteness part of white women, right? And if there is so much of what folks see in terms of what it is that they want to see that's great again, right, that has to do with the whiteness part, then it makes that connection, that solidarity precarious.
I want families to win. I know what my ancestors did. I know what Ella Jo Baker did. I know what Dorothy Height did. I know what Martin Luther King did, Bernard Rustin. We could go through a list of people who fought for the rights that we received in 1964. And today, right now, those things are being threatened.
I want us all in this building to sing, "Go tell it on the mountain," to let my people go. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere.
And all we want to do is to make these people understand that we are human beings and we can work together.
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Do you feel that it's wrong to discriminate against a person solely on the basis of his race or color?
Racism was so overwhelming that where I was didn't seem to make that much difference. I was there with the men who were the great leaders in the civil rights movement, the Big Six, although I have to say it was 7 because I was one.
Brothers and sisters in the struggle for human dignity and freedom, I am here to represent the struggle that has gone on for 300 or more years, a struggle to be recognized as citizens in a country in which we were born.
During the 1960s, Black women were pivotal figures in the civil rights movement, but often they were background players and overlooked. History will tell us that Black women have always been there, laying the groundwork, organizing, and speaking out. This was crucial work that led to legislative victories such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As the 1960s came to a close, the 1970s pushed women's rights into the spotlight. The women's liberation movement was demanding gender justice.
Well, the main demand, of course, is equal rights to have a job, to have respect, to not be viewed as a piece of meat, equal rights to set forth our own humanity, equal rights to get into graduate programs, to get into schools, to training programs.
Unfortunately, Black women have not been consistently welcomed into women's rights movements with open arms. Dating back to the women's suffrage movement in the 19th century, this history of exclusion is clear. Many Black women were hesitant to identify as feminists because early feminist movements were largely led by white women who ignored racism. This made room for a movement called Black feminism. Black feminism recognized that Black women faced unique struggles that white feminists didn't acknowledge. From this movement came the National Black Feminist Organization, NBFO, and later the Combahee River Collective.
And the interesting thing about that is that we never expected to get the response that we did. We knew there were black feminists out there, but we'd been so beaten down kind of by the media image of it that we believed, well, if there were black feminists out there, it was probably maybe one in every state at best. And the next day we received over 200 calls from black women around the country saying, where have you been?
Black women have questioned feminism because of our recognition that race is always a factor. So there's been a calling attention to racism within the women's movement, particularly the racism of privileged class women. For example, early on a major thesis of feminism was women need to get out into the workforce. Right. Well, masses of black women were already into the workforce and weren't liberated.
The Combahee River Collective statement boldly declared that their liberation would not come through mainstream feminism or traditional civil rights activism. Instead, they articulated an intersectional approach.
Women of color have transformed the very nature of feminism. And the hallmark of feminism today is what we call intersectionality. To think these ideas together, to think race and class and gender and sexuality not separately, but together.
Black feminists didn't just theorize change, they organized. They built coalitions, led grassroots movements, and created spaces for black women's voices.
For those of us who were imprinted with fear like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk, for by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive.
Most resistance does not come from the guy on the corner or the guy shooting pool or even the black guy. You know, in the civil rights organization, the person that seems most threatened by the feminist movement is your socially upward mobile, college-educated white man who has so much to lose by everybody getting together.
As we move back to post-2020 world, another movement is underway, a push to collectively hire more diverse workers. But is America ready for this type of change? Next time on The Audit.
Even if you have the best of intentions, believing you want change and experiencing change are two different things.
Because we never actually addressed, right, we just dressed it up.
You know, after sitting in those listening sessions, I knew my experience in corporate America, but it broke my heart to hear others' experiences.
So the number of departments wanting to hire tenure track Black architecture faculty was astronomical. So if we're the only 2 qualified ones, how can we fill 13 positions?
The big pushback.
I'm Tracy D. Hall, and this is The Audit. Chapter 2, The Big Pushback. From late 2020 to 2021, corporations were pushed to implement diversity in the workplace and hire diversity managers. Under heightened public scrutiny, they were compelled to prove their commitment to diversity on their website and in their marketing materials. By 2022, the hiring of Black and brown professionals had reached a high point. But was the old power structure in America really ready for this type of sweeping change? In time, the movement encountered widespread resistance, with many people showing increased resentment to newly implemented DEI policies, openly expressing that they were tired of talking about race and gender in the workplace, and claiming that racial inclusion in leadership was at odds with traditional business values and the notion of meritocracy. Despite the fact that many of the newly hired Black and brown leaders had credentials and experience that often far exceeded their predecessors. Black women, considered saviors just 2 years earlier, were now once again relegated to bearing the burden and vitriol of a country still unable to wrestle with its factual history of racism and wariness of women's leadership.
As 2020 drew to an end, the standard practice was social distance and Zoom meetings. Corporate America was busy running diversity training programs and listening tours. One thing became quite evident in the following years. Real systematic change would require entire corporate frameworks to be designed from the ground up. The work would be demanding. Talking about race in the workplace was a difficult subject that many did not want to engage in.
When Black women started in these roles and were handed all of these issues, which were gigantic during COVID, and they still linger, but office culture had changed. People were working from home. They didn't want to return to the office. You had supply chain issues. You had issues with learning new tech and learning new ways of doing things. All of these things were suddenly coming at Black women. And I think that what many started to realize is that they had to decide what the job actually was. Was the job to come in and actually not make all of those changes, but to sort of swim through the onslaught? Or was the job to really try to bring a board and staff along to function in a different way?
But I don't think what we expected, though, from that movement was how lonely it was for those people, right? Because when they were elevated, it was oftentimes just them being elevated as the chief or whatever, trying to convince all their colleagues and all business leaders to buy into the movement, which ultimately became counterproductive because, like, as we see today, you start to dismantle these offices, and guess what? Diversity goes away because it was being upheld by single departments versus it being culturally a part of the DNA of organizations, and that's a big challenge.
Because it's not just like you get a new person and then you adjust. That happens in every organization. But in order to really follow direction, you have to encounter a lot of resistance that, people may have at different levels.
And the recognition that the systems we have, all of our talent development, all of our, executive development, all of our peer supports, all those intricate things that go into making a corporate environment work, right? We're set up to help white men succeed, and they did it really, really well. It's perfectly designed to get the results that we had. So now we brought more Black women into those environments and did not change any of the support structures. And yeah, I can only imagine how that felt.
We had 21 engagements that had something to do with equity. That was in 2021. In 2023, and in 2024, and into 25, we've had 3. First of all, this work is much harder to do than people realize. And when they are really starting to make some headway, the work is likely becoming more difficult, and people tend to back off from that.
In order to do some of this work, you had to do internal work that would change. Now, I said I was an optimist, but there is a skeptical part of myself. And the skeptical part of myself says, when you start to involve money in our country, things change. And so a lot of the commitments that were made were from these very large organizations where they suddenly were going to invest financial capital into others. That's part of what started to raise the flag for folks that started to come after some of this work. But when you started talking about moving money into Black and Brown owned spaces, the backlash started to begin.
It seemed like there was going to be a real movement within corporate America, and everybody was joining in and seeing how they could play their part, how their platforms needed to be used to address racial inequities that existed, right? Felt like a movement at the time. Certainly today, we know that was a moment, right? It was not a movement at all.
During that time, as a Black woman leader, we were asked to carry the water on all of it, right? People asking us to speak, people asking us how we feel, people asking us to have those feelings represent a broad swath of like the community and population, like in these moments. And that's not fair to anyone, right? And as we do, we show up.
In terms of when I was in corporate America, I can even think about so many things that happened in my career, but I became institutionalized. I was really good at navigating crazy. I was actually told that. They're like, you're actually really good at this, right? Because institutions have their values, their way of getting things done. And that can be hard as a Black person coming into a new organization and trying to figure out how to win.
Many of us were asked repeatedly, so what are you going to do differently in this moment? And I can remember being asked that very clearly and saying, I'm not going to do anything differently because I've been doing it for many, many, many years, right?
There's also this easier to dismiss us kind of thing and build consensus around it, because in organizations and cultures, there's networks, there's ways of getting things done. There's ways of building the meeting before the meeting. Are we actually invited to that meeting? Are people building allyship around us to work against us?
My mother gave me the blueprint at a very young age, and she always taught me, like, they want you to be good, but never better than them, right? And so as a leader, I always position myself under other leaders who had the social capital that I knew was good enough people to allow me to do my job, but I never had the main seat.
You have to really get in touch with yourself if you're going to do serious work around building an anti-racist organization. You can't think that the work happens outside of you and that you're not going to be impacted by it. It means that you have to do some of your own personal work. And so maybe this is a part of yourself you're not in touch with. Most people aren't. Why? Because if you're part of the majority population, you don't have to be in touch with it. But certainly as a Black person, I am in touch with it all the time, every day, whether via social media, walking down the street, or watching television. Somebody reminds me in some way or another that I'm a Black person living in the world.
Many companies fully embrace diversity hiring and thrive. Others do not. Cracks begin to form in the fragile foundation of support. We begin to see Black women leaders leaving their newly acquired roles within the workplace. But why?
Often, especially in this frenzy to find like an optic solution to an endemic problem, the setup was come in, yes, we trust you. Yes, you can lead us to something different. And then when you actually tried to execute on that, you were told that that wasn't part of your responsibilities, or you were undercut from people who reported to you, or, you know, there was a range of backlash that could happen at any level of an organization. And it always came down to like your qualifications, or like what your job was, or the culture you created, or all of those things. But when that part doesn't happen, when you don't change the rest of the organization, so you actually know how to support the new change maker you brought in, then what you're gonna do is drive that person out.
You know, and then when the story started to come out in aggregate, it was like, oh, you hired her to come in here and have a voice and provide something that was different than what was here before. And then when she showed up and was doing that, then she was saucy. She was irreverent. She didn't understand the culture. She was combative. You know, so all these things that you see your counterparts doing were being read in a different lens.
Nobody has ever looked at me and said, I'm hiring you because you're a black woman. Nobody. Nobody's ever looked at a black man and said, I'm gonna hire you because you're a black man. There are 17 other people more qualified than you are, but because you're black, I'm gonna give you a shot. That's not how those conversations are going, right?
If historically power has operated in a certain way where you exclude me or you make me jump through so many hoops that only me and one other lady get to even start to go to the door, to be in the room, to sit at a chair that might be at the table. Like, this is how far we have to come to be where you just walked in. Let's start there. Now you're gonna open the door and you're gonna come out of the door and come get me and drag me in the room and sit me down at the head of the table? Who does that and why?
A lot of the reason that Black women and people of color generally are accelerated into roles, ascend into roles, is because they are qualified. They are super qualified. They are overqualified and bring a set of skills, not just technical skills for the role, but leadership competencies. The lack of support while they're there and given kind of insurmountable tasks. That was a frequent thing in corporate America, that when people of color got promoted, it was the business that was in trouble.
Yes, but think about the numbers. So if you're thinking about any of these top 25 universities, let's just go law school. The numbers are much better than they were when my mother went to college, but these numbers are nowhere near where it's necessary for a Black person that has gone to an Ivy League school, who is an attorney, to jump 3 or 4 levels, even qualified, here to that position. You do not have enough because you've not let enough in to begin with. So no one was noticing that, or everybody was fine with the incremental gains, until you get to a point where now all of a sudden it's necessary. Now all of a sudden DEI is the buzzword, right? So now everybody wants to look like they're on board with DEI, because the antithesis of that is being on board with the cop that killed George Floyd, right? So we've reduced these things of like, if I'm not trying to be inclusive, then I am racist.
Our understanding of why Black or brown people were being hired post George Floyd is flawed. The media would have you believe that many were not qualified. One could suggest it is something much deeper than a massive human resource blunder. It is something deeply embedded in our culture we haven't fully addressed.
For one thing, it becomes clear that racism is not mainly a problem of attitudes, of individual bigotry. No, it's a tool. It's a tool to divide us and to prop up systems, economic, political, and social systems that advantage some people and disadvantage others. And it's a tool to convince a lot of white folks, who may or may not be getting a great deal out of our highly stratified society, to support the status quo. Could be worse, at least I'm white.
After the murder of George Floyd, I was astonished at the number of people in a leadership position, regardless of mid-ranking on up, did nothing.
You mean in the police force or just in
in companies. People who would lead teams, that after the murder of George Floyd, they didn't talk to their teams. They just did nothing. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they didn't have the skills, they didn't know how to have an uncomfortable or difficult conversation.
In all of the promises and pledges, in all of the platitudes and pontification, we never truly addressed or solved the one underlying issue that precedes and transcends all others: racism.
Because we did not address, right, the underlying rumblings that existed in 2020, had we addressed them more head on versus been in, perhaps bulldozer mode to say we have a window, we're going to take that window and we're going to move as quickly as we possibly can.
If that is something that you're not used to, when you actually sit down to talk about it, you get very, very self-conscious about it. I mean, no one wants to be called a racist under any circumstances, right? And so people will do their best to say a little, maybe not a lot, because they don't want to come off sounding like they're racist. And that means that they're not really digging deeply enough.
Did a great job at raising the voices of those who are impacted and marginalized. But people, particularly white men, who never had experiences with diversity, I think we did a poor job at bringing them along the journey, right? And it wasn't framed correctly, right? Because what the movement was actually saying is, we have talented people who are ready right now for leadership opportunities within corporate America, but they can't get it because the representation is off, and you are more likely to hire people who look like you, sound like you, talk like you. We all have unconscious biases. And so when you talk about this movement of why it was short-lived, my personal opinion is we did a very poor job at making room for the naysayers to be able to brought along the journey.
And I feel like a lot of leaders made decisions they would never have made in normal times, under normal circumstances, of their own volition. But they were off balance, did not know how to react to their workforce generally. And then when their workforce turned to them and said, we need to be a part of racial reconciliation as well, they moved in places they never otherwise would have gone.
I mean, I think that my colleagues in those kinds of positions were hopeful that if they look at the trajectory of civil rights, they could justify or make sense of why this rash to be so inclusive made sense. That like somehow we were learning, not quite linearly, but we're making these kind of like leaps. I think that they just wanted to believe that people in power would volunteer that power over to them because they were qualified, because they did all the right things.
The systems we have, right? And whether you believe you have a system or not, you have a system that is getting you the results you get today, right? Whatever your results are, your system is perfectly designed to give you those results, right? So if you want different results, you better have a different system, right? And you better look at it from a systemic perspective. If all you say is, I want to change the results, by what? If you set a different target and do nothing to change the system, and the systems that have existed for however long and do not support people of color, do not support women, do not support any diversity through your pipeline. You can't just one day wake up and say, I'm going to change the target and hope it works.
We are trying to contend with the way we've been socialized all our lives. We're saying we can do better. We can do something different. This isn't right. And people really have a hard time internalizing that. They can want to do it, but actually taking the time, understanding that it's going to take time, that this work is iterative, is often beyond their imagination.
I don't think we were ever there. And that's why that feeling of this is a real movement, to me, I now feel a little bit bamboozled by it, because it's like it was in your heart all along. Like you never actually changed your mind. You just knew you didn't have the social capital in the midst of the movement to actually say how you feel. And we left those individuals behind. So now that there's a power shift, all you're seeing is those same voices raising back up to the top again. They're not saying anything they were saying differently than before 2020. They just were silenced for a moment, but now guess what? They've now reemerged.
Big companies, big publicly traded companies, there's a push for shareholder value constantly. Quarterly results, it's exhausting for leaders who are in the highest roles. And one institution I worked in, we actually had pretty good diversity. The head of R&D, research and development, engineering for the company was a woman. The head of global procurement, the money, was a Black woman. The highest ranking Black woman in the organization was terminated because of what was happening with shareholders in the public. And I went to her office to console her, because she always supported me in any initiative in the company. She was busy. She didn't always have all the time in the world, but that nod in the hallway, that occasional hug, that email me if you need anything, knowing that I could do that brought me so much comfort. It brought me so much confidence in the organization. And when I saw what happened, I walked into her office to console her, and I just burst into tears. I mean, I just thinking about it. Because representation matters. It matters. And I know that that woman poured her heart and soul into that company, and the way that she was dismissed was hard to see. I felt like a company that actually supported people of color, that actually supported women, that helped them grow and be in roles that were unprecedented, was dismissed.
What we've witnessed is actually the fastest backlash in the history of America. So you go from the modern day lynching of George Floyd, which happened in May, to having all of these statements that are made from companies, all of this mass hiring that happens, to September, when moms of liberty start to descend on school board meetings across the entire country in a coordinated communication campaign to tell school boards that their child, their little white child, is being taught to hate himself.
We are opposed to labeling people as oppressors and victims solely based on the color of their skin. Parents, beware of terms like social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion. Those inherently good things are being used to disguise a biased political agenda.
Going from the moment of actually self-reflection as a country of ways that we can all do differently, do better, we switched to a thoughtful, well-executed fear campaign.
Suppress classroom lessons about racism and slavery. The Times reporting on nearly a dozen Republican-led states seeking to ban or limit how the role of slavery and the pervasive effects of racism can be taught.
These are the most robust standards in African American history, probably anywhere in the country.
The new guidelines require middle school students be taught, quote, how slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. An idea Vice President Kamala Harris in Florida Friday lambasted.
How is it that anyone could suggest that in the midst of these atrocities, that there was any benefit to being subjected to this level of dehumanization?
By 2023, the economy has tightened. Many of those hired in 2020 are the first to be let go. The temperament in the country has changed. Not only are we not addressing the issue of race, many other movements are underway. And as we will soon find out, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, will take on an entirely new definition in the coming years.
We have taken a meat cleaver to DEI already in the underlying bill. The unfinished work is Amendment 314, which I've offered, which ends all DEI funding.
Often referenced as DEI hires. It will simply mean unqualified, many times used as a derogatory statement.
DEI is being equated to lowering standards, right? And that there's not enough talent with the standards required for positions, and so people without standards are accelerated into those positions. That was never my experience. I implore people that if their initial reaction to DEI is that means lower standards, why do you think that? Let's spend some time talking about why you think that. What in you, what in your experience, what in your belief system makes you think that the next woman or the next black person or the next Hispanic person or the next LGBTQIA person will be any less qualified than the next white man? Why do you think that?
Next time on The Audit.
You know, there was a watershed moment when the Supreme Court made the ruling around college admissions as it relates to affirmative action. I think that was the nail in the coffin.
But for every one of those stories, you also have stories of companies, the Jamie Dimons, right, that are standing firm and saying, you know, we get real business value because of the work that we do.
A lot of this it's about power. Dismantling the government is about power. Billionaires running our government is about power.
And when we think about this movement of DEI, because it's about power and control and corporate greed, they were going to position themselves in whatever way to win.
There's not a zero-sum game. There is enough for us all.
Tumultuous present, uncertain future.
I'm Tracy D. Hall, and this is The Audit. Chapter 3, Tumultuous Present, Uncertain Future. In 2023, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion became code for unqualified, specifically the hiring and promotion of Black and brown employees, and tied to a woke political agenda. With dizzying speed, a new presidential administration made good on its promises to erase all remnants of DEI from the federal government. Despite the fact that years of study have shown the primary beneficiary of DEI to be white people, with the employment of Black women and people of color being targeted with the threatened lifting of anti-segregation protections, is DEI dead on arrival? Or is America about to learn the hard lesson that racism is bad business?
Black lives are only gonna matter for about 5 minutes. And when I said that in the meeting, everyone's like, ouch, that sounds so disingenuous. It's like, it's not disingenuous, it's history. It's history.
When great progress is made, great resistance comes, right? So this is where we are now, right? We made so much progress that not only did we see a Barack Obama, we saw a Kamala Harris. Oh my goodness. What does that mean for people who have a particular claim on the country, right?
When I'm now shifting from the person who takes the notes to the person who's gonna call you out and say, hey, why didn't you consider Johnny for that job? And why would you hire him? That's an uncomfortable conversation that they weren't prepared to answer, and damn sure didn't want to answer from a more junior African-American woman who had a specific role on the team to just shut up and do the work.
There's a certain burden to that, quite honestly. that you feel everything you're doing is representing the entire race, which is ridiculous. We are not monolithic, and we shouldn't have that pressure, yet we do. We think that everything that we do is being looked at in a particular way, and it often is, because we are first, because we are the only, because we are Black.
A lot of this it's about power. Dismantling the government is about power. Billionaires running our government is about power.
And when we think about this movement of DEI, because it's about power and control and corporate greed, they were going to position themselves in whatever way to win.
I mean, this backlash is actually proof that the movement worked. It is fierce, and it is rabid, and it is because we had 50 years of tepid diversity efforts.
But a new article featured on CNBC.com right now says that technology companies, including Alphabet, the parent company of Google, also Meta platforms, have made big cuts to those DEI programs in 2023 so far.
Texas isn't the first. They're actually the second state to ban DEI offices. Florida was the first. And according to the Best Colleges website, at least 18 other states have introduced similar legislation. So more are expected to follow.
I just want to acknowledge that that doesn't mean that it's the end of the movement. It actually signals that the movement is working. And so the fear campaign is to convince us that it never worked, that it was, for meritless opportunities, and that, racism doesn't exist. And so we should never have folks of color around in any way, shape, or form, and we should never say those words again. People are scared.
I don't know if you've seen that illustration where you see three people standing on a box looking over a fence, and they're looking at a baseball game, and everyone has the same exact box, same height. But you notice that everyone is not the same height, and everyone can't see over the fence. That's equality, because everyone has the same box. If we're talking about equity, that means that because I'm a little shorter, I need a taller box. Or because I'm taller, I need a shorter box. But equity means that I'm gonna have resources and the access that I need to be successful. And it does not look the same for everyone, yet that is often what happens.
So there's a more sophisticated way you have to approach equity than just starting a department and then hiring somebody brown to run the department. And then being shocked when the one brown person that's brought in that's resented by the person that thinks they took their resources is not having leeway in helping fundamentally change the culture of the organization.
The word equity is a key value in the diversity, equity, and inclusion argument. Commonly, it is misunderstood or misused. It does not mean equal. It is understanding not everyone is dealt the same hand in life. Equity means treating people fairly, recognizing that they may have different needs. However, in our current anti-DEI climate, we see the inaccurate use of certain buzzwords. Words like diversity, DEI, and critical race theory are used to represent single stereotypes. It is as if definitions of words no longer matter.
So now you see what equity, what inclusion, diversity, not just on race, but really you just meant race, and you just meant one race most of the time. And then it's like sprinkles on top of the cupcake if you can throw trans people under the bus. We didn't really mean disabled people. Unless they're brown disabled people, or unless they're homeless under the viaduct that I have to drive through. Like that, yeah, them too, put them in there. And there's a sophistication of understanding people's misunderstanding of language that is at play here that we should not be naive about. So using CRT, critical race theory, and DEI interchangeably all the time, CRT, DEI, right? So you're just like, oh, I'm so tired of hearing about it, right? So there's There's a flooding of the information systems that if you're not paying attention, you don't understand, or it doesn't directly affect you, or you think it doesn't. Those two things are interchangeable, and it's all about people who could just go to college, they got a Starbucks too, whining. What are they whining about now?
This is a CBS News special report. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. President Biden is about to offer his reaction to the Supreme Court's landmark ruling overturning affirmative action in college admissions. In a 6-3 decision, the court said that Harvard University and the University of North Carolina's admissions programs that take race into account violate the Constitution.
The landmark ruling by the Supreme Court effectively ending affirmative action could have consequences far beyond higher education.
Its reasoning is a roadmap for challenges to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives at so many corporations. And conservative activists, they are already targeting the hiring programs, internship programs, and promotions at major employers like Morgan Stanley, McDonald's, and Starbucks.
You know, there was a watershed moment when the Supreme Court made the ruling around college admissions as it relates to affirmative action. I think that was the nail in the coffin. What I also know is that there had been court cases being won in different states where they had already ruled around college admissions, and the vast majority of the general population wasn't following it because it was local state news.
You start with colleges, and now you have government agencies, which, employs, the vast majority of Americans. When you think about industries and sectors, the government's a large employer, right? And so it's gonna trickle over into corporate America. It just naturally has to. And I think, when people focus on like politics and elections, et cetera, that's why they matter, not just for like who's gonna occupy the seat of presidency, but electing local officials heavily matter too. Like state laws matter. Who's your mayor matters. Who's your, senator matters, because all of that rolls up. And then when we think about the courts, in his first term, he appointed the most judges ever.
When you look at affirmative action and you think about, we have to end the affirmative action because it helps folks of color. Do you know who gets helped the most by affirmative action? It's white women.
We have reached a turning point. With the affirmative action ruling, it opens the door for what some would call an anti-diversity movement. In April 2023, the Heritage Foundation publishes Project 2025, a playbook for a conservative presidency. It foretells fundamental government changes in 2025. Many thought it was too extreme, even fiction. It was not. There is a new momentum in the country, and it is in plain sight.
One more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
What happened to Claudine Gay is a broader thing around Ivy League colleges too. She was the first to fall. She was an easy target, but all of them are falling. So what's happening now, there are so many sectors where people don't want to be CEO.
Claudine Gay never had to explain to any other Black of her colleagues, I can guarantee you, what happened to her and why. Because we all knew. We've all been there before. We've all had those experiences, but it still resulted in her resignation. It came back to what we talked about a little bit before, power, right? The power just was not there to quote unquote save her. And the reality of this, she doesn't need to be saved. She did her job, she bowed out, she resigned. But for me, the thing that made me proud was the way she resigned. She wanted to be very clear. Like, she published op-eds, she talked about her experiences, she made people understand like how we got here to this moment. This is not a question about my qualifications or who I am, etc. This is about me leading an institution that people don't feel like I am qualified to lead.
Turns out corporate America doesn't seem to actually care about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It's the Wall Street Journal reporting that activists want to get politics out of business, and they're suing Target, some other companies over progressive company stances.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion policies at companies across the country now may be at risk.
Look, the theory here is that companies have been violating federal employment law, number one, exposing themselves to big liability, for which they would presumably have to pay shareholders money to fix. The other is that they're depriving shareholders of the best talent.
There is not a single piece of research, legitimate research, validated research, that doesn't show that diverse workforce, again, the more life experiences, the more perspectives, the different way of thinking that you have, and that is, all dimensions, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, all of it. The more diverse, the better ideas you have out of that. And so those who started with a very values-based, a very business-focused focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion are sticking with it today because it would be walking away from a moneymaker for them. That's why they're going to stick with it. And those who never saw it that way, always thought as charity work, those whose initial thought would be DEI means lower standards, but we didn't voice it, we didn't address it, those are the ones that are walking away today.
The reality of it is those who are committed to the work made it a part of their culture and footprint, and they're still doing the work. And those who were never committed, it never got kicked off to begin with. Let's just be honest about that. Like, it never really took off in the way it should have been, because it shouldn't be that easy to dismantle, because it's a cultural movement about how people treat and respect and acknowledge talent. It's not about actual skin color. Like, it's DEI is not about actual skin color. It's getting people to open up, remove their own unconscious bias, to acknowledge where talent exists and how teams become better because of diversity.
We're seeing fewer people say that they want to go into leadership roles. Fewer people of color and fewer women are saying that they want to go into a leadership role. Why is that? Well, that's because they see how people are being treated.
I feel like the folks that took it as this kind of like unlikely blip in the glitch in the system, short portal door opening, those are the ones who have stayed in those positions or succeeded because they were strategic about either setting up certain things within that framework or smart about who they picked based on maybe some research about the history of whatever organization it was. So of, let's say, 15 friends I had across professional sectors that made these leaps in that moment, like 2 still have those positions. This is not just art. This is across the board, philanthropy, government, business, maybe 2.
In Chapter 1, we highlighted many leading companies pledging hundreds of millions of dollars to support diversity and racial equity within their organizations. As we approach the November presidential election, we will see many companies roll back their DEI programs, many eliminating the programs completely. This continues into 2025.
To jump in, and you've been predicting this, we've been waiting for it, and we do have some breaking news from the decision desk. NBC News can now project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, which means he is the winner of this race and will return to the White House as this country's 47th president.
President Trump continuing a record-setting flurry of executive actions with a new series of orders that aim to end all federal diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, programs.
Also tonight, the Trump administration calls it common sense. Critics call it an all-out assault on diversity. The president has ordered all federal employees working in diversity, equity, and inclusion roles to be placed on paid leave starting today.
The thing that was sad about it for me is there was something about why we cannot get behind someone who wants to approach the vision for the country, the work of the country, with the joyfulness and the spirit of like, we can, we will, we could do it together. And I'm so happy and proud like to represent and do that. Instead, what that represented to others was like all of these terrible stereotypes, tropes.
I felt really good about my canvassing in Michigan for the day. I had gone out with a girlfriend and we stopped at a gas station And when we stopped at the gas station, we saw two African-American women. They both had a bunch of small kids in the car. They were stopping to get gas. And my friend, Sarah, was outside, and she's talking to the women, just encouraging them to vote, while I'm inside, grabbing snacks for our road trip and preparing to hit the road. And when I came out, one of the women looked at me and she said, "We're gonna go register and we're gonna go vote like she told us to, but she forgot one thing." And I looked at her, and I'm walking into the conversation at the last minute, so I don't even know the nature of the conversation. And she said, "America's never gonna elect a woman, let alone a black woman." And this young lady, if I'm gonna, judge based off the persona that was set up, was maybe 25 or less. And as we're driving back, she and I looked at each other and said, "Holy crap, she's right. We forgot one thing. Our candidate, while we think that she is qualified to do the job, her biggest barrier is something that nobody is willing to actually talk about."
We're not the face that we want to put out to the world. I think that part, makes me sad, because I think of a lot of things in terms of race. I can't help to do that because most of what your life experience is in a country like this is that most people will racialize it for you, whether you do it or not.
She is a black woman running in this role, and she couldn't distinguish herself from her predecessor. She wasn't set up with a succession plan. She wasn't given that support. It's we're talking about black women and the big setup, and we're not talking about Kamala Harris. That was the big setup. And still, she came at it not like any other candidate we've ever seen. She came at it joyfully. She came at it in Converse, She came at it with her black sorority in droves. She came at it with dancing. And so I think of that as pretty remarkable.
First of all, I want to say I'm bullish on black women. I'm bullish on women. And I'm bullish on this country because I know we can do better. I know we can do better. I'd also say around black women, we talked about their undeniable technical skills, their undeniable leadership, their ability to perform. The narrative that has happened around recent downfalls, terminations, decisions of black women to lead, to me, that doesn't say anything about their leadership. It doesn't take anything away from their leadership. So I want the viewers to know that. Black women are wonderful leaders, highly capable. We're at a moment in our history where it is the most challenging thing for anyone to be a leader right now. Anyone. We're at a moment where social media and the news media can turn an organization on a dime. We're in a moment where employee and civil unrest can happen to any company.
I hope that whether it's the independent parties or the Democratic parties and even the Republican Party, they decide to figure out how to have a bipartisan path forward, right? How to not allow this moment to happen again, because it's going to be disruptive. I don't see a scenario where any population of people win, right? And I think the wealthy think that they're, gaining some level of control and access back, but America is ran off of a diverse economy. There is not one class of people that can sustain our economy. So therefore, some of the richest economies look diverse like the rest of America does.
When we think about black women and resilience, we only have to look to history to see that black women, that has been part of our mantra. We are resilient. Whether you're talking about Harriet Tubman or you're talking about Kamala Harris, we are resilient. We will get back up. We will do what needs to be done. Yet, we also deserve to rest. And that is something that we don't think about often because we're doing. And we can't continue in that way. I know that people are tired, and they're tired of being the only ones that understand what's at stake. And one of the reasons that we, I think, understand what's at stake is because we're going to be impacted in a way that other folks who are not from marginalized, who are not from underrepresented communities are going to be impacted. And so it makes sense for us to do this work, yet we have to think about ourselves.
I am the mother to 3 awesome adult daughters. So my oldest daughter in particular, I have had actually a series of challenges over the past year, leadership challenges. And she has been a sage at 28 years old, right? Like, she's just been a sage, and she's given me language and ways of being very graceful. And then lastly, as I continue kind of my personal growth journey, I don't think that you ever necessarily end that. I am relearning to just be comfortable just being with me. And sometimes, like in the leadership journey professionally, making sure that you're comfortable with yourself gives you the better opportunity when you have to show up, like in all of these different spaces that sometimes are very comfortable and sometimes they're very uncomfortable. But what you have to be in that uncomfortable space is still highly present.
And so they've heard the narratives of the strong Black woman. They see it, their grandmothers, me, all of my friends. So this is a reality for them. And I joke with them whenever we see something on television where someone shows up and they kind of save the day and it's a Black woman. She always has this kind of demeanor, right? Where she's like completely disgusted, but she's also well put together. And she does it and it's over. So I joke to my daughters and say, what don't Black women do? And they say, play. So it's like this gift in our house now that if you see Black women, most of the time in any capacity, they're getting it done. And this isn't new, this is historic, but I do think that we're in a moment where Black women are tired of that. And so across the geographic spectrum, across the age spectrum, you are seeing what I think is for the first time, we'll see if it lasts, these kinds of phrases like, drink my water and mind my business. I'm not saving anybody this year. Call me in 4 years. So this idea that we are knowledgeable, that we do things outside of our own best self-interest. We have no expectation that anybody's going to do what they said they were going to do. But out of the good of the whole world, at least this country, but the whole world, we continually do things to make sure that everybody is going to be okay. It's exhausting. It's not cute to have that. It sounds great, but nobody wants a cape all the time. And so what happens now if we just check out?
Oftentimes, Black women are at the bottom of the privilege pyramid. And so we have to deal with racism and with sexism. And we're turned to as like the nurturer in chief throughout it all. And what comes to mind was right after the election, there was a piece of art where it was a bunch of Black women that were sitting on a rooftop watching the world burn. And it said like 92% underneath it. And what it signaled was that once again, Black women had shown up. 92% of the votes for Kamala Harris had come from Black women. And they had canvassed and, raised money and told the right story, and yet here we are. And we knew, what came next. It's still the America that we fell asleep in the night before the election. We knew what was at stake and what was coming. And we knew that even watching the world burn, that the buildings that were burning, it will be Black women who go in to save those people. Our role has been to receive the least and give the most for a really long time. And I'll say that we're just really damn good at it.